So ESPN, they've been releasing their top 10 at each position heading into the 2024 college football season. Georgia was featured in both the quarterbacks and the running backs list, having Carson Beck as the best quarterback heading into 2024 according to their rankings, having Trevor Etienne as the 8th best running back in college football according to their rankings. So Georgia represented the top 10. And I told you when I talked about Trevor Etienne the other day, we discussed, hey, I don't think that they're going to put any Georgia pass catchers on the list. And there's maybe not anything necessarily wrong with that. Well, guess what? Pass catchers list comes out a couple days ago, and there are no Georgia Bulldogs on it. A couple of guys in the honorable mentions, and I'll hit on that. But, is this something that, when you put it into perspective like this, Georgia doesn't have like this ultra elite guy on the outside in terms of a weapon on offense, according to a list like this, maybe according to the eye test and what we've known so far. Brock Bowers would have been top 5 on this list last year, probably top 3 with Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and those guys. And they don't have that. And would Ladd McConkey have been in the top 10 list? Maybe not. He would have also been an honorable mention. So they would have had 2 really respectable guys last year, in addition to all the other players on Georgia's offense, like a Dominic Lovett and Dylan Bell, Robert Thomas, Aaron Smith, etc., etc., etc. This time, there is no Brock Bowers. Ladd McConkey's moved on. Does Georgia have elite weapons on the outside? If they don't, is that going to be a problem? I think Georgia's offense is going to be really, really good again. This has been a top 10 offense the last 3 years. It just has. When you look at the numbers, when you look at points per game, when you look at yards per game, when you watch them play, when you look at the balance of it, right? Georgia has been a pretty balanced offense as well over the last few years. And now they do have that number 1 quarterback in Carson Beck. So maybe it matters a little bit less if they have the elite weapons. I have a couple different takes on it, all right? I want to discuss the 2 guys on their honorable mention list, Oscar Delp and Benjamin Urasek, the transfer tight end from Stanford, who has not enrolled yet. And I'll hit on that as well. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here, talking about Georgia's pass catchers. Are they elite or not? I think that they're really, really good. I don't think that the group is... I also discussed in a recent video that I believe that this wide receiver room has a chance to be better. Totally think that's true. I think another year with some of these guys in the program, another year with Carson Beck as the guy that's throwing to them, I think there's going to be some good chemistry. You just lose Ladd McConkey, right? And then Brock Bowers to an extent being a wide receiver. I think that as a group it could be a little better because I think it'll actually be slightly deeper this time. They just won't have the top end guy like a Brock Bowers. So overall, top to bottom, slightly better this year. Just they don't have that top end thing. And look, ESPN kind of hits on it. Who made their list? Luther Burden, a guy we saw last year, a guy who put up good numbers against Georgia. I agree that he's definitely got to be in consideration at least for the top guy. They have him as the top guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but his last name is McMillan from Arizona. I've been trying to attempt this name for a few days now, but this is another guy, just super productive. Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State. Tej Johnson, Oregon. Trey Harris, Ole Miss. Xavier Respesto, Miami. Colin Lacey, Louisville. Colson Loveland, Michigan. He had a pretty good year for Michigan last year. People are expecting him to take a step forward. Travis Hunter from Colorado. Isaiah Bond from Texas. Those are the types of players that made this list. Guys in the other notable players in this honorable mention, right? Zachariah Branch from USC, lightning quick player. Torrey Holton, Colorado. Evan Stewart, Oregon. And then you get guys like Oscar Delp and Benjamin Urasek. Right, so they did it on a voting system and how many votes, and I think like the top 3 votes, they get more points. But Benjamin Urasek got 1 vote, Oscar Delp, it looks like, got 5. So there's a few of these ESPN writers that are thinking about them. Georgia's tight ends, I think, are going to be really good still. They just don't have a Brock Bowers. Oscar Delp's going to be out there a lot. I think he's probably the best blocker out of the group. Benjamin Urasek is going to be a guy that they brought in to help make up for what they'll miss with Brock Bowers and have another elite receiving threat at tight end. Urasek, from the clips I've watched, the numbers I've looked at, the things I've read, pretty good with the ball in his hands. He can take a ball 45 yards to the house, right? So they want that element in there with the offense as well. But you get that a little bit. You get Oscar Delp out there hurdling people and making one-hand catches. So they have versatility. And then obviously the younger guys like Lawson Lucky and J.D. Rendell. Very, very athletic young tight ends. So this tight end room's got a lot of capable pass catchers. Georgia's receivers, though. Is it a problem that they don't have elite receivers? They haven't been recruiting elite receivers all of this time, right? Well, they just won a couple national championships. Who was the best receiver? Well, George Pickens was in 2021. He just didn't play most of the year. So you have a guy like that. A.D. Mitchell on the outside. All right, obviously George Pickens was a big-time recruit, but outside of him, it hasn't been. A.D. Mitchell's a 3-star. Ladd McConkey was a 3-star. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, a 4-star, right? But a guy who, his production wasn't necessarily what his recruitment was, I guess, right? Marcus was a very good player for Georgia the last few years. Dylan Bell, right? 3-star, right? They're going out and they're getting players. They're not going out and getting, like Luther Burden was a big-time prospect. Zachariah Branch, big-time prospect. Isaiah Bond, good prospect. A lot of these guys, Travis Hunter, right? Number 1 prospect in the country. These guys are really good. Tej Johnson. Emeka Egbuka, 5-star receiver. He was the number 1 receiver a few classes ago. I believe in the 2020 or the 2021 class. Georgia isn't recruiting guys like that. Off the top of my head, their highest ranked pass catcher is Arian Smith's a 4-star. Obviously, they went and got Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas from the transfer portal. Dylan Bell, 3-star. Right? They don't have like this bona fide stud receiver that they've went out. It doesn't matter. They got really good quarterback play. They've got good offensive line play. They've got running back play. They just need to have production, and they just need to win games. It kind of is the MO for Georgia. They just want to win these games. But you look at the statistical breakdown receiving last year. A Bowers that got hurt. Obviously, an elite receiving threat. They had that in Bowers. A Bowers who got hurt, missed a few games. He gets 714 yards. Georgia does this by committee. Listen to this. Nobody 1,000 yards, nobody over that 714. Bowers, 714 yards. 56 catches, 714 yards. Dominic Lovett, 54 catches, 613 yards. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, 34 catches, 435 yards. Ladd McConkey, 30 catches, 478 yards. Ra Thomas, 23 catches, 383 yards. Dylan Bell, 29 for 355, and so on and so on. They had a lot of guys who had some production, and no, they didn't have someone that went for 1,000 yards. They didn't have a couple of 1,000-yard receivers like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas or Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan. Obviously, they had some very elite quarterbacks, too, at those schools. Carson Beck still gets 3,900 yards, 3,941 yards, almost hits 1,000 yards. They're going to spread the love. Carson Beck, one of the best quarterback in college football, probably. Right? I want to watch it again. I want to see more before. I've been, and I've gotten a little bit of hate for this, but I've been less hesitant to just crown Carson the number 1 quarterback in college football. I do think he is the best. I just don't think it's by a super wide margin. I think it's kind of barely over some of these other guys. But I do think that he is at the top. And I think he's bound for a really, really good year. And part of that is because of what I just said a second ago. They've got a ton of capable guys. 3 out of those top 4 will be gone in Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, Ladd McConkey, and Brock Bowers. But combined, they made up for less than half of his production passing. Carson Beck's production passing. 714 plus 535, that's roughly 1,249? 1,249 yards plus Ladd McConkey's 478. I'm not going to math that out as much. We're talking about 16,700. That was less than half of his passing yards. They went out and got multiple receivers from the transfer portal. They went out and got another tight end. What Georgia wants is depth. Why? Bowers, McConkey, they get hurt, and Georgia doesn't look as good in the game against Alabama, in the SEC championship against Alabama. They struggle a little bit with them out. You want to have depth, and you want to have a lot of people that can succeed, especially in a season that's getting a little bit longer and a little bit longer. The more you expand the playoff, the more possibility for more games. Injuries happen in football. Ra Thomas got hurt. All sorts of Georgia Bulldogs got hurt. They want a ton of good football players. And that's going to be one of the hardest things to keep up with all these new changes in college football. Kirby Smart's trying to do that. And I think that's why Georgia's just fine at wide receiver. Thanks for watching. Links are down below for the newsletter.